Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man, they say murdered three? Strange things that happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
Welcome to Strange Things, broadcasting from the Raimundo Rios Mayo Library in Arkanasa. Sorry about that. Forgot to turn the microphone on. This is season number 1, episode 35. I am your host, Chris James. It is December 30th, 2016. That's right, folks. The end of the year has arrived. Today we're going to be talking about the lost Dutchman's mine, something a lot of people have heard about, but they don't have all the details. The year has run its course. Any mistakes you've made will have to be dealt with next year. Any of those 2016 New Year's resolutions you haven't gotten to yet, you have 7 hours to get to them, so it's time to get busy. There's a place just east of Phoenix, Arizona. The land is rough, mountainous area where people sometimes go and are never seen again. It is a place of mystery, of legend and lore. It is called the Superstition Mountain. Somewhere out there is a mine that is said to contain enough gold to make any man rich beyond their wildest dreams. It has enticed men to go wandering off into the desert to die or disappear. They call it the Lost Dutchman's Mine. The name Dutchman refers to Jacob Waltz, but he was no Dutchman. Jacob was born in Oberschwerdorf, Germany, in 1808. His family were made up mostly in the textile industry. Waltz, along with many family members, emigrated to the United States in 1846. Once arriving in the U.S., Jacob took work on farms to earn enough money to live, but he wanted more, much more. He made his way out to Arizona to look for gold. He worked for several mining firms and learned what to look for in order to strike it rich. He knew working for someone else would not make him rich, but it would give him the knowledge he needed to find his fortune. Once he'd gotten all the training he could, he struck out on his own, looking for the big score that would make him wealthy. Now, prospecting is a lonely occupation. Most prospectors become solitary due to it not being able to trust anyone they encounter. If you found the mother lode, it wasn't all that hard for your partner to suddenly become your executioner. That's why most prospectors would have their mule to carry their supplies and themselves. So Waltz would strike out on his own and spend months at a time walking through the scrub looking for the signs of gold. You wouldn't find gold nuggets laying in the dirt. Prospectors were looking for quartz. Once you locate a seam of quartz, you had to follow it, hoping it would take you to a vein of gold to mine. This was a time and labor-intensive occupation. 7 days a week, from the first day until the last. Sun up until sundown, no days off to sit and relax. When a vein of quartz had been located, the prospector had to dig into the side of the hill, following the quartz and hoping it would lead him to gold. Having dug a hole deep enough to find some precious metals, the prospector would have to leave his hard work behind. Most would close off the opening to their dig site to keep others away from their treasure. They would have to haul their gear and supplies into the nearest town, to the government survey office. There the prospector would have to leave his... There the prospector would file a claim to the site where he thought the gold would be found. The claim would give the prospector legal rights to the shiny lumps he pulled from the ground. It did nothing to protect him physically, only legally. Should someone come along who had little or no regard for the law, it was a simple thing to kill the prospector and take whatever he had for themselves. This had happened enough times to cause prospectors to go about their business armed at all times. This kind of threat hanging over their heads at all times caused most prospectors to become solitary, paranoid folks. Anyone and everyone was viewed as a threat. Now anyone encountering Waltz would have asked him where he was from, and he would say, "From Deutschland." This is how Germans refer to Germany. Deutschland, Deutschland über alles. Germany, Germany over all. Those who had no idea what Deutschland was thought he was saying he was Dutch. Thus the term came to be the Lost Dutchman Mine instead of the Lost German's Mine. Personally, I think Lost Dutchman sounds far better. Kind of like the Flying Dutchman, but that will have to be left for another show. Waltz worked his way from the flatlands to the hills and then into the mountain, looking for a likely place to lay his claim. When his supplies ran out, he'd wander into the nearest town and look for any kind of work to earn enough cash for his next quest. This was by no means a glamorous life. Days, weeks, months of solitude. The food you ate was whatever you carried with you. Your bed was the hard ground where you landed. If you felt sick or tired, well, you were on your own. Waltz worked the gold field of Sierra Nevada foothills for more than 10 years, never striking it rich, but always finding just enough gold to keep him going. By 1868, he was in his 50s and wondering if he was ever going to find that mother lode. The local Indians called him Snowbeard because of his long white facial hair. With each passing year, the effort became harder, and his dreams grew a little dimmer. Then something happened. Waltz turned up in town, saying he had found it. He had struck it rich. He had a gold mine that would be the envy of everyone. Enough gold to make 20 men into millionaires. But now he was feeling sick and old. By the fall of 1891, he was hardly able to walk, let alone work his claim. He took a room from an old widow named Julia Elena Thomas, who owned a small bakery in Phoenix. It is said they may have become a lot more than just friends. Waltz is supposed to have promised to take her to his secret mine sometime in the spring. The Dutchman died on October 25, 1891, with a sack of rich gold ore beneath his bed. A very rich bag of ore. This gold ore was some of the richest anyone had ever seen. Once folks found out that Waltz was dead, they did their best to try to find out where his mine was. He hadn't placed a claim at the local office, so they had no way of figuring out where he had found the gold filling that sack. We're going to take a brief pause here, play a few commercials. We'll be right back, so don't go away. You're listening to Arkanasa Radio. Do you have skin? Would you like to take better care of it? Call Lourdes James, independent beauty consultant, and set up an appointment. Call 723-3019. If your vision isn't what it used to be, and you're not sure you're seeing Bigfoot or just your neighbor mowing his lawn, stop on by Del Norte Optical, 107 Calle del Norte, just across the street from the Embassy Suites. You should be able to see what you're looking at. Looking for a great cup of coffee? Swing on by the Organic Man Coffee Trike, 1002 Iturbide, suite number 7. Not a coffee drinker? They have hot chocolate, hot tea, and sometimes muffins and cookies. It's a great place to meet your friends for a conversation or curl up in the corner with a good book. The Organic Man Coffee Trike. Life is too short to drink bad coffee.
No, don't say goodbye. Stay with us. This is Arcanasa Radio. Quédate con nosotros. Estás escuchando Arcanasa Radio.
You're listening to Strange Things with Chris James. And welcome back. Suddenly, someone had a map. It appeared Julia Thomas was drawing maps and then selling them. She became quite proficient at these detailed and exotic-looking charts. She based her drawings on stories told to her by Waltz. Not all these maps were from Julia. There were others who just sketched out some lines on a piece of paper and called them Dutchman maps. They were supposed to be the maps that would lead some lucky soul to find the lost mine. The big question was, did Waltz ever draw out a map before he died? Or did some scoundrel create the map to sell to those who had the money and the desire to pay for such things? There seems to be a lot of maps out there to look at. The maps Julia drew may have been close enough to lead someone to the mine, but she was missing a few details. The only thing people could agree on was Jacob Waltz had been prospecting in and around the Superstition Mountain. So all the maps offered referred to the mountain. The Superstition Mountain is actually a collection of rough terrain that has gained the name of a single mountain. The contour of the region takes in thousands of cliffs, peaks, plateaus, and mesas, and even today, much of it remains largely unexplored. Despite the tendency by many to call this a range of mountains, it is in reality only one. It is certainly not the highest mountain in the region, but it has the reputation of being the deadliest. Over the course of several centuries, it has taken the lives of many men and women, and has perhaps caused a madness in them that has encouraged them to kill each other. Then there are the men who wander around the mountain until their minds crack and leave them in a state of insanity. The Apache Indians were the first to lay eyes on the mountain. They found the mountain to be spooky, and this led to stories being passed around of evil spirits living in the area. The thunder god was supposed to live in the mountain. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived on the scene, it already had a bad reputation. Francisco Vázquez de Coronado came north from Mexico in 1540, seeking the legendary 7 golden cities of Cibola. The Apache told him the mountain was filled with gold, but he should not ever try going there because the mountain was sacred. The Indians were afraid of the thunder god who lived in the mountain, and this god would not look favorably on anyone who trespassed on his land. When the Spaniards tried to explore the mountain on their own, men began to vanish mysteriously. If someone stepped away from his companions for, say he needed to relieve himself, he would vanish. Later, when his body was found, the body had been mutilated and the head was missing. The terrified survivors refused to return to the mountain, and so Coronado dubbed the collection of peaks Monte Superstición, which explains the origin of the famous name. There is another superstition mountain out in California. It's located in the Imperial Valley, and it has nothing to do with the legend. The bad thing about this superstition mountain is it looks to be just a few miles away as you see it across the desert. You could easily walk to it in just an hour or two. It's actually 15 miles of nothing but sand, and it gets up to 120 degrees. There's no place to find water, and there are no roads or houses if you find yourself in trouble. The sand is soft, and it makes walking near impossible. The Border Patrol works the area, and they try to rescue people who think they can walk in it. There have been lots that didn't make it. I worked this area back in my career, and it was about as desolate and unforgiving a location as I've ever seen. The Superstition Mountains east of Phoenix, Arizona, has a far more dastardly reputation. The first man to discover gold the Indians spoke of on Superstition Mountain was Don Miguel Peralta, a member of a prominent and wealthy family who owned a ranch near Sonora, Mexico. He discovered a vein of rich gold there in 1845 while searching for the treasure described to Coronado. This was 46 years before Waltz is supposed to have found his sack of gold. Was this the same vein of gold, or were these two men mining different parts of the same mountain? Before Peralta returned to Mexico for men and supplies with which to excavate the gold, he memorized the surrounding territory. He described the mountain's most outstanding landmark as looking like a sombrero, so he named the mine the Sombrero Mine. To others, the peak or spire looks more like a finger pointing upwards, and it has also been referred to as the Finger of God. Except those early white explorers, Paul Weaver. He used the rock as a place to etch his name with a knife, and subsequent prospectors discovered the etching, and they dubbed the landmark Weaver's Needle. The name stuck, and nearly every reference to the lost mine used the needle as a point of origin. Peralta returned to Mexico, and he gathered men and supplies in order to work the mine. He came back to the mountain and got busy. The gold vein he had found was enormous. Once production was in full swing, Peralta was shipping millions of pesos worth of pure gold back to Sonora. This was a gold strike like no other. The stuff that dreams are made of, as Humphrey Bogart would say. The Apache became angry once they learned the Spanish were violating the sacred land of the Thunder God. In 1848, the Apache raised a large force with the intentions of driving Peralta and his men from the area. Peralta had somehow gotten word of the impending battle, and he pulled his men out of the mine. They packed up all the gold they had, and not processed or shipped home yet, into burros and wagons. Because he had planned to return some day, Peralta took elaborate precautions to conceal the entrance to the mine and to wipe out any trace that they had ever worked there. The smelter was destroyed and all the tailings were scattered. They tried to erase any sign of activity in the area. Early the next day, as the men were preparing to move out, the Apache attacked. Taken by surprise, Peralta and all of his men were killed. The pack mules scattered in every direction, spilling the gold as they ran. For years after, prospectors, soldiers, discovered the remains of the burros and the leather packs that were still brimming with unprocessed gold. The area around the battle was dubbed the Gold Field. It became a favorite place for outlaws and get-rich-quick schemers who spent months searching for the lost gold. The last case of anyone finding the bones of a Peralta mule was in the 1900s. A man named C.H. Silverlock showed up in Phoenix one day with a few pieces of badly decayed leather, some pieces of Spanish saddle silver, and about $18,000 in unprocessed gold. The next discoverer of the Peralta mine was a man named Dr. Abraham Thorne. He was born in East St. Louis. Early on in life, the doctor had befriended a frontier legend, Kit Carson, and when Fort McDowell was founded in Arizona in 1865, arrangements were made for Thorne to become an Army doctor and with an officer's rank. Dr. Thorne arrived at his post when fighting between the whites and the Apache was still at its worst. The Indians were being wiped out by the Army, but President Abraham Lincoln soon put an end to this. He came up with a compromise. Lincoln proposed a reservation along the Verde River near Fort McDowell, which could serve as a sanctuary for the Apache. It was here, in an area known unofficially as the Strip, that Dr. Thorne came to live and ply his trade among the Indians. He soon made many friends and earned the respect from the tribal leaders, caring for the sick and injured, as well as delivering a baby here and there. In 1870, Dr. Thorne had the weirdest experience in his career. The elders of the tribe came to him with a proposal. He was considered a good man and a friend of the Apache, so they told him they wished to take him to a place where he could find gold, but only as long as he allowed them to blindfold the doctor during the roughly 20-mile journey. Dr. Thorne trusted the Indians, so he went along with their request. His eyes were covered, and he was led on a horse out into the wilderness. The tribal elders took the doctor to an unknown canyon, and then they removed the eye covering. The doctor later wrote that he saw a sharp pinnacle of rock about a mile to the south of him. Treasure hunters believed this was most likely Weaver's Needle. He saw no sign of a mine, but piled near the base of the canyon wall was a stack of almost pure gold nuggets. He picked up as much of it as he could carry and returned home. Later he sold the ore for $6,000 and became another strange link in the mystery of the mine's location. The story of the Lost Dutchman's mine has a twist added at some point in history. One version says there were two Dutchmen, or Germans, that worked together, Jacob Waltz and Joseph Weiser. One was considered to be a reasonable, decent character, whereas the other was a mean, disreputable person. The pair were supposed to have found the Peralta mine and claimed it as their own. They showed up in town and used gold nuggets to pay for extravagances. There even have been a number of stories about how the men found the lost mine. According to some, they stumbled upon it by accident. Others say that they had killed two Mexican miners who they had mistaken for Indians, and then, realizing the men were mining gold, they took over where the dead men had been working. The most acceptable version of the story is that they were given a map of the mine by a Mexican Don whose life they had saved. The man who gave them the map was supposed to have been Don Miguel Peralta, the son of a rich landowner in Sonora. This would have been the grandson of the original Peralta the Apaches had killed. The two men would come into town and buy drinks and supplies with gold nuggets. Some claimed this gold was stolen loot from the Vulture mine, while others said that it was a much higher quality and had to have come from somewhere else. Regardless of where it came from, the two men would show up in town and spend their gold for about 2 decades. At some point, Joseph Weiser disappeared without a trace. Some say the Apaches had killed him, while others maintain that Waltz had killed him to keep the treasure for himself. But Waltz was always around, at least part of the time. Long periods would go by when no one would see him, and then he would show up in Phoenix again, buying drinks with gold nuggets. It was said that Waltz had a richest gold ore that anyone had ever seen, and for the rest of his life he would vanish back and forth to his secret mine, always bringing back saddlebags filled with gold. Whenever anyone tried to get information out of him, he'd always give contradictory directions as to where his mine was located. On many occasions, men tried to follow him when he left town, but Waltz would always shake his pursuers in the rugged region around the mountains. There are hundreds of theories as to the mine's location, and there have been dozens of books written about the subject. Hundreds of would-be prospectors have searched the Superstition Mountain and the land around it. Most have come home with little more than a sunburn, but there have been many that have died or disappeared. There's no way of knowing how many people have died in pursuit of the lost Dutchman mine. Some who have disappeared may have just slipped away, unwilling to admit that they had failed to find the treasure. Others may have gone in secretly without telling anyone they had a surefire way to locate the mine. No one knows they went other than whoever found them and did away with them. They would be just a file at the local police department as a missing persons case. We're going to take a brief pause here, play a couple of commercials. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this. You're listening to Arkanasa Radio. Do you have skin? Would you like to take better care of it? Call Lourdes James, independent beauty consultant, and set up an appointment. Call 723-3019. If your vision isn't what it used to be, and you're not sure you're seeing Bigfoot or just your neighbor mowing his lawn, stop on by Del Norte Optical, 107 Calle del Norte, just across the street from the Embassy Suites. You should be able to see what you're looking at. Looking for a great cup of coffee? Swing on by the Organic Man Coffee Truck, 1002 Iturbide, Suite number 7. Not a coffee drinker? They have hot chocolate, hot tea, and sometimes muffins and cookies. It's a great place to meet your friends for a conversation or curl up in the corner with a good book. The Organic Man Coffee Truck. Life is too short to drink bad coffee.
No, don't say goodbye. Stay with us. This is Arkanasa Radio. Quédate con nosotros. Estás escuchando Arkanasa Radio.
You're listening to Strange Things with Chris James. And welcome back to the show. To date, There's no accurate number of the deaths, but we can guess it to be around 200 to 300 were killed in the Peralta attack, and maybe 2 or 3 in the Dutchman story. There are also those who went looking for the treasure and found the Apache instead. These people would be less than a footnote in history. In the summer of 1880, a pair of young soldiers appeared in town of Pinal. They had recently been discharged from Fort McDowell and were looking for work at the Silver King mine. The mine was operated by Aaron Mason. They asked him to take a look at some gold ore they had found while crossing through the Superstition Mountain. Mason was stunned to see a bag of extremely rich gold ore. He asked the two where they had found such a rich pile of gold. The soldiers told him that they had been on a mountain and had flushed a deer into one of the canyon. On their way out, they found the remains of an old tunnel, and when looking into it, found it to be a mine. The small bag of gold was only a little of what they had seen there. Mason asked them if they could find the place again, and they told him they could. They had been working as scouts for the army, and so they had to pay attention to details so they didn't get lost. They paid close attention to the land around them. They remembered the mine being in the northerly direction of a sharp peak. Once more, people think this was Weaver's Needle, and the mine was in a very rough country. A narrow trail had led from the peak and into the valley where they had found the mine. The soldiers admitted, however, they knew hardly anything about mining. They asked if Mason would be willing to go into a partnership with them. He agreed and purchased the ore they had brought with them for $700, then helped them get outfitted for their return to the mine. He taught them how to reinforce the dig site, and how to go about working a mine, and what to look for as they dug. The two left Pinal the next day and never returned. Mason waited about 2 weeks, and then he sent out a search party. The nude body of one of the soldiers was found beside a trail leading to the mountain. He'd been shot in the head. The other man was found the next day and had been killed in the same manner. Apaches? No one would ever find out. This was a pattern that would repeat itself for years to come. A year later, a prospector named Joe Daring came to Pinal and took a job as a part-time bartender. When he heard about the death of the two soldiers, he grew interested and began to wander out to the Superstition Mountain. He was looking for the mysterious mine. He was a bit more successful in his search than most. According to Deering, he said he had found the mine. He said it was kind of a pit shaped like a funnel, with a large opening at the top. He said the pit had been partially filled in by debris, and he thought there was a tunnel that had been walled shut with rocks. Daring planned to work as a bartender until he could make enough money to buy the supplies he needed to work his find. He later went to work at the Silver King mine so he could learn how to work a mine properly. He continued to save up for his expedition, getting ready for the day he thought he was ready. One day, while working the Silver King mine, he was killed in a cave-in. Another prospector with connection to the Lost Dutchman mine and its mysterious deaths was Elisha Rivas. He was better known as the Madman of Superstition. From 1872 until his death in 1896, he lived in a remote area on the mountain and raised vegetables in his garden. The Apache never bothered him. They were afraid of people who were crazy, thinking they were in contact with their gods. This gave Rivas the upper hand. You see, Rivas was known to run naked through the hills and canyons at night, shooting his pistols in the air. He said he was trying to shoot down the stars. In April 1896, an acquaintance of Rivas noticed he was overdue for his trip into town and went in search of him. The decomposing body of Rivas was found near his shack. Coyotes had been munching on him, but they were not the cause of his death. His head had been severed from his body in the same manner as the Spanish soldiers had been found. His head was found a short ways away. The same year that Rivas was found murdered, 2 men from the east went looking for the mine. They were never seen again. No bodies, no remains. No one has any idea of what had befallen the 2. Around 1900, 2 prospectors named Silverlock and Malm began to excavation on the northern edge of the superstition. They found some of the gold remaining from the Peralta battle, but little else. For their own reasons, they continued working the area for years after, sinking dozens of shafts and finding nothing. Then in 1910, Malm wandered into a town called Mesa. He was babbling incoherently, saying that Silverlock had been trying to kill him. The deputies went out to look for Silverlock. When they found him, he was wandering around the mountain, babbling incoherently. They managed to bring him into town. The man was determined to be insane, and he was committed to a territorial asylum. Malm was sent away to a county poorhouse. He was none too steady either. Both men died within 2 years. No one knows what happened or why it was that the Superstition Mountain had such an effect on these men. Something out there drove these 2 men insane. That same year, the skeleton of a woman was found in a cave high up on the Superstition Mountain. The body had several gold nuggets laying on the ground beside it. The coroner judged the death to be of recent, although no further information about her was ever found. No one knew who she was or where she had come from. The gold nuggets were never explained either. Was she an unlucky prospector, or did she find the nuggets in the cave before dying from unknown circumstances? 1927. A New Jersey man and his sons were hiking on the mountain. As they walked along a trail, someone began rolling rocks down on them from the cliffs above. They saw him duck behind the edge of a cliff after hurling boulders down on them. One of the boys had both his legs broken by one of these rocks. They were able to escape with their lives, but no one was ever arrested for the assault. The following year, 2 hunters, out looking for deer, had boulders and rocks thrown down at them from the cliff above. The 2 hunters managed to get away without being injured. Once more, no one was ever caught in connection with this dastardly deed. Someone didn't want anybody coming up onto the mountain. In June 1931, a man named Adolph Ruth, who worked for the government, went into the Superstition Mountain looking for gold. He had told people he had a map that showed where the Peralta mine could be found. When he failed to return, a search party went out looking for Ruth. They found his campsite, but he was nowhere around, and there was no indication as to what had become of him. In December, someone found a skull on top of Black Top Mountain, which is near the Superstition Mountain. The skull had 2 bullet holes in it. A forensic investigation proved that this was, indeed, what was left of Adolph Ruth. Later, a headless skeleton was found. It was soon connected to the skull. In one pocket, the investigators found a checkbook with a note that said, Vini, Vidi, Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. They found no trace of the map Ruth had with him. For unknown reasons, his death was declared either accident or suicide. I guess he shot himself in the head twice. December 1936. Roman O'Hale from New York died when he fell from a cliff while searching for the mine. It was believed to have been an accident. Now, someone could have pushed him, maybe the same person who had thrown the rocks at the other two search parties. It would have been near impossible to prove such activity. In 1937, an old prospector named Guy Hematite Frink came down from the mountain with some rich gold samples. He stayed in town long enough to gather his supplies. That following November, he was found laying on the side of a trail with a bullet hole in his stomach. He had been shot by someone unknown. A small sack of gold ore was discovered beside him. His death was also ruled to be an accident. Someone accidentally shot this guy and then ran off and left him to die. I would think someone shot him to steal his claim and to make him keep his mouth shut. Around June 1947, a prospector named James Cravey took a trip into Superstition Mountain, only he went by helicopter. He said he was looking for the lost Dutchman mine, but with a new slant. He was going to look down from above and hopefully spot something. He had the pilot drop him off near Weaver's Needle in the La Bourge Canyon. He was going to hike out after looking close at what he had seen from above. When Cravey failed to show up, when he was supposed to, a search party was sent out to look. They found his camp, but he was nowhere to be found. After searching the surrounding canyons, the searchers found a headless corpse a good distance from the camp. The body had been wrapped in a blanket. The head was 30 feet away. The coroner said there was no sign of foul play. 1949. Two young men from Texas went hiking around the Superstition Mountain. They walked off into the mountain and vanished. No one has ever found any trace of either one. In February 1951, Dr. John Burns, a physician from Oregon, was found shot to death in the Superstition Mountain. It was said to have been an accidental death. Early 1952, Joseph Kelly of Dayton, Ohio, began his own search for the mine. He was never seen alive again. His skeleton was discovered near Weaver's Needle in May 1954. He had been shot from directly above, according to the coroner's jury, by accident. Okay, this is leading me to believe the worst shooters in the world all live around Phoenix, Arizona. What else could explain all these accidental deaths from shooting? The thing to remember about a coroner: they're not medical doctors. They get their authority to declare someone dead and say what killed them from a political appointment. At some point in their careers, they get a few minutes of training as to how to tell if a person is dead or not, but that's about it. If you want to make an enemy, call a medical examiner a coroner. Oh, they really hate that. Two California boys hiking into Superstition Mountain the same year as Kelly vanished without a trace. Nothing further was ever seen of them. January 1956, a man from Brooklyn told the police his brother had been missing for several weeks. It was believed he'd gone in search of the lost Dutchman's mine. His body was found the next month with a bullet hole above the right temple. April 1958. A deserted campsite was found on the northern edge of the mountain. There was a blood-stained blanket, a Geiger counter, cooking utensils, a gun-cleaning kit, no gun was found, and some letters from which the names and addresses had been removed. No trace of the camp's occupant were ever found. October 1960, a group of hikers found a headless skeleton near the foot of the cliff. The skull was found 4 days later. It was determined the skeleton had belonged to an Austrian student named Franz Harrier. What he was doing out in the mountain is anyone's guess, but whatever he was doing, someone took offense to it and ended his life. We're going to pause here, play a couple commercials. We'll be right back, so don't go away. You're listening to Arkanasa Radio. Do you have skin? Would you like to take better care of it? Call Lourdes James, independent beauty consultant, and set up an appointment. Call 723-3019. If your vision isn't what it used to be, and you're not sure you're seeing Bigfoot or just your neighbor mowing his lawn, stop on by Del Norte Optical, 107 Calle del Norte, just across the street from the Embassy Suites. You should be able to see what you're looking at. Looking for a great cup of coffee? Swing on by the Organic Man Coffee Truck, 1002 Ederby Day, Suite number 7. Not a coffee drinker? They have hot chocolate, hot tea, and sometimes muffins and cookies. It's a great place to meet your friends for a conversation or curl up in the corner with a good book. The Organic Man Coffee Truck. Life is too short to drink bad coffee.
No, don't say goodbye. Stay with us. This is Arkanasa Radio. Quédate con nosotros. Estás escuchando Arkanasa Radio.
You're listening to Strange Things with Chris James. And welcome back to the show. If you've got a particular subject that you're just dying to hear on the radio, send me an email. You simply send it to strangethings@arkanasa.com and tell me what it is you'd like to hear, and I'll try to put together a show sometime. 5 days later, another skeleton was found, and this time in November. Police identified the body of William Richard Harvey, a painter from San Francisco. His cause of death was unknown. January 1961, a family was having a picnic near the edge of the Superstition Mountain when they discovered a body buried beneath the sand. It was a Utah prospector named Charles Bohan. He'd been shot in the back. This kind of ruined their lunch. 2 months later, another prospector, Walter J. Mowry from Denver, was found shot to death in Needle Canyon. In the fall, police began searching for J. Clapp, a prospector who'd been working on the Superstition on and off for about 15 years. He'd been last seen in July. The search was eventually called off when no evidence of the prospector could be found. 3 years later, his headless skeleton was discovered quite a ways from his camp. His body was identified by 2 cameras with the initial JC scratched on them. June 2011, Curtis Merworth, Malcolm Meeks, and Adrian Charles, the 3 prospectors from Utah, seeking the fabled Lost Dutchman mine, disappeared in the mountains. They thought they stood a chance of finding the mine where others had failed. Merowith was a 49-year-old native of Salt Lake City, Utah. He was fascinated with buried treasure. He had somehow acquired a map that was supposed to show the location of the lost Dutchman mine. His first attempt to find the mine led to his needing rescue. He called for help after becoming lost in the wilderness. The second attempt, he took along 2 companions who would hopefully keep him out of trouble. The skeletal remains of 2 prospectors were discovered by Rick Grahan, who noted that one of the skulls had 2 holes in the back that looked like bullet holes. The second skeleton had a couple of ribs protruding through the shirt, as if he had been shot through the torso. What happened to them is undetermined. Dental records confirmed that the bodies were of Merowith's partners, Meeks and Charles. January 15, 2011, Merowith's remains were found a mile from the other 2. His bones had been scattered by coyotes and other scavengers. The circumstances of their disappearance have yet to be resolved. 5 days after he went for a hike in the Superstition Mountain, Kenny Clark was found dead, more than 1.5 miles from the trailhead. His pack was out of water. He appeared to be heading towards a water source. It didn't look like foul play, but then a lot of the deaths in the area don't look like foul play. Clark, whose body was located July 6th, was the latest victim of the imposing 160,000-acre wilderness area east of Apache Junction. Apache Junction is about 40 miles east of Phoenix. Now there is a map that is carved in stone, literally. It is known as the Peralta map. It consists of 7 stones, 4 carved into sandstone tablets, 2 carved into the shapes of crosses, and 1 from red quartzite, which is carved in the shape of a heart. When assembled, the map shows lines and dots running in odd angles. The dots are related to what was known as a post-road map dating back to the Mexican-American War. The red quartzite heart fits into a recess carved into one of the sandstone tablets. There are words carved in the stone in Latin, as well as numbers which spell out the date 1847. No one can say for sure what the map represents. If they did, they would have already found the treasure. Lots of people claim to understand the map, but then why are they still looking? The Superstition Mountains in Arizona have had a bad reputation for hundreds of years, and not just for people going missing. Some say there are portals in the area, portals that will transport you to some far and distant location, something in line with the Bermuda Triangle, only on land. People have also reported seeing weird lights moving about the mountain, as if someone with a bright lantern is looking for something. These lights move about in places where no one could possibly be walking. Then there are those who believe that evil spirits lurk in the mountain, waiting to set upon anyone who trespasses into their domain. The combination of a huge gold deposit being located in an area where death is a common occurrence is just plain weird. Is it the gold that holds the spirits in place, or could it be the kind of people who go into the dangerous and desolate places that draw out the worst in man? A few words of advice. Now, any United States citizen has the right to go looking for treasure. And if you're going to go looking in the Superstition Mountain, you'd best go armed. In fact, take a few friends who are armed as well. Take lots of water. When you've used half your water supply, it's time to turn around and head back. If you've used 2/3 of your water, you might not make it back. It is hot in the daytime, but it gets cold at night, so dress appropriately. If you don't know what you're doing, why do you keep doing it? If someone offers to sell you a map of the lost Dutchman's mine, ask yourself, why are they selling it instead of going and getting the gold themselves? And before you go, ask yourself, what makes you any better at finding treasure than all the others who have died looking for the Dutchman's mine? Now I know Christmas has already come and gone. The gifts have been bought. Some of them have been returned. But if you're looking for a book to read, might I suggest Saucers? It's a book I wrote several years ago. The story goes, it's Laredo, Texas, 1943. World War II is raging in Europe. Pilots and air crews were being shipped to Laredo Army Airfield for training. When a B-17 Flying Fortress goes missing during a routine training flight, no one suspects an alien invasion. Soon, when glowing orbs are seen flying through the air, the men of the Army Air Corps must find a way to battle an enemy from beyond our galaxy. You can find this book at Amazon.com. It's called Saucers by Chris James. What a lot of people don't realize, back during World War II, if you were going to be in a B-17 bomber crew, they would send you to Laredo for training. When Laredo, Texas was about 30,000 residents, the Laredo Army Airfield had over 100,000 men and women working there. Now, if you're being trained to fire a machine gun out the side of a B-17, the Army wasn't too keen on putting you in an airplane and flying you around the county and letting you shoot up the countryside. Instead, what they would do is they would get you to stand in the back of a deuce-and-a-half with a .50 caliber machine gun mounted on the side. They would drive the aircrew out into the ranch just to the east of town, where there'd be wooden targets set up along the road. As the man was being bounced and jiggled about in the back of a truck, he would see the targets that he needed to engage, and he would fire at them. If you were able to, which it is private land, but if you're able to go out there and have a look, you would find literally millions of spent .50 caliber shells laying on the ground out there. I've had the opportunity to go out there and look, and unfortunately it's a piece of history that's going to slowly disappear with time. The book is fiction. It's based on aliens from outer space attacking the air base in Laredo, but it's a fun read. There are lots of characters in it that are actually based on people I know, so give it a check. Saucers by Chris James at Amazon.com. With that, I wish everyone a Happy New Year. Let's see if we can't make 2017 a great year to be alive. Until next time, this is Chris James, and see y'all later.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man, they say murder 3? Strange things that happen here, how stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?